Welcome to Redbeard Radio. I'm Brian Keith, and today we are talking with John Bellamy. You heard him in episode number 10, all the way back in 2019, talking about how to use LinkedIn to grow your business fast. Then episode 45 in 2020 about his own journey in entrepreneurship. And now in 2023, John Bellamy is talking to us about cyber threats for small business. He's going to help us understand in this episode what some of the common cyber threats against small business are and some of the tools that we can use to fight back against them. John, welcome back to Redbeard Radio.
Hey, Brian. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on board.
It's going to be good, though. This is sort of like one of those episodes where I talk to a lawyer and it just becomes frustrating because there's all these things that we're not doing and different ways we can be damaged that we don't want to think about. So I'll do my best to retain my trademark positive attitude as long as you, John, tell me how bad is it? How am I going to lose everything and get sued and go to jail today?
I love it, Brian. I love it. I think, the big thing here is, small businesses really just need to be aware of the risks that are out there from a cyber criminal perspective. Like we hear in the news all of the time. Like I just got back from London, as we spoke about before, and there was a big British Airways hack and a few other companies just in the last couple of weeks. But, they're happening all the time through the US, they're happening all the time through Australia, they're happening all the time throughout the world. And I think a lot of the time, like the big end of town, the enterprise businesses, they've got the cash flow, they've got the teams, they've got the resources to put things in place. And we're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to millions of dollars a year invested in that deterrent, if you like, around that cyber security, cyber intelligence space. And they're still getting hacked. But when it comes to small business owners, they think that, I use Norton antivirus, or I've got, Dashlane, or, I'm using two-factor authenticator via Google and I'm all good. They won't go after me. It's all right, I'm too small. Where in actual fact is they love targeting small businesses.
Can you give us an example to wrap our heads around? What's the equivalent of having our car stolen?
Yeah, so from our perspective, I think the really important thing to understand before I give that example, there's cybersecurity, which most people are aware of. So cybersecurity is primarily, the way I explain it, primarily looks at that internal perimeter. So that's looking at your hardware, that's looking at, malware coming into your systems and all of those bits and pieces from there. So that's usually where you will have, for example, a security consultant or a managed service provider that will look after that cybersecurity realm. Where we come into play from a dark exposed perspective is the cyber risk intelligence. So we're looking beyond the wire. We're looking outside of the business, outside of the landscape of the perimeter of the business, and we're looking into the open market. Okay, so the dark web, we're looking for future threats that may not have happened yet. So primarily the area that we operate in from a threat intelligence perspective and bringing that back to the small business, a great example of that is business email compromise. So if you think of a small business and the risk that they have, it's multifaceted, but to break it down into three really simple parts that everyone would understand is you've got your internal risk, so your internal team members. For example, John or Mary's on Facebook. They use the same logins for Facebook, email address, password as what they do, for example, when they log into their computer systems at work. They get hacked by Facebook, Instagram, something along those lines. Those credentials are now exposed on the dark web. They get put up for sale, somebody buys them, and then they try and break in to other areas there. So that's from an internal perspective. You've got then the external perspectives being the supplier relationship and then the client relationship. So if you think of like your existing clients, suppliers, technology platforms that you utilize, these are the things where you can be exposed without even really knowing that you could be exposed. To give you one step further, there was I won't mention who it was or anything like that, but there was a technology platform in the accounting space, in the bookkeeping space, that had a breach a number of years ago. And that data was resold again over the last year or two on the dark web, that exact same track of data. So all of these, the clients utilizing this software had been notified years ago, hey, go take these actions, change passwords, do all of these bits and pieces to resecure your account. And there's people that did that, and then there's also many thousands of people that didn't take that advice. And so what happened was when that data got resold on the dark web, the exact same data, the cyber criminals were able to just literally had the keys to the kingdom, the usernames, the passwords, and literally just started going through this platform, logging in to see if they could get access to these accounts. And there was numerous accounts that they could get access to, which resulted in a lot of money and a lot of, a lot of pain for many small businesses out there from invoicing fraud and all of those bits and pieces.
Well, then I think about using password managers, and then I remember that was it LastPass or 1Password that got hacked recently?
It was LastPass, not 1Password. Yeah, that had a cyber attack. As far as not going into the full details from it, because that's best leading to the technical experts behind it. But what LastPass did was they actually communicated quite well, in my opinion. Other people would disagree, but I believe they communicated quite well with their database. And although there was sensitive information that was compromised, there was also a lot of effort on their end to safeguard what information could be accessed and not accessed from that perspective. But let's talk about that for a moment, because there's various degrees, right, of information that cyber criminals can get access to. So, for example, recently here where I am in Australia, towards I think it was late last year or whatever it might have been, or earlier this year, one of the big telecommunication providers had a breach. And there was things that were taken, such as driver's license numbers, such as date of births, all of this information. So they have this range of personal identificational information, PII, information that they're looking at. So some breaches, they may not actually get a password. But if you think of it from this perspective, and I'll try and break it down as simple as I can, think of the sexy Excel spreadsheet, right? And what the cyber criminals are doing is they're harvesting data, and what they call this is like a fools list, FULLZ list. So essentially what they're doing through multiple breaches is they're pulling data. So for example, they get one, SaaS company, and they might be able to get a first name, an email address, and a password. Then all of a sudden they breach, a health department or something like that. And they've got, first name, last name, date of birth, and like a social security or a Medicare number. And then they pull another breach and they get a bit more information. So they're getting these breadcrumbs, if you like, from all of this data. And then what they're doing is they're washing that data and rinsing it together and then going, okay, well, where are the commonalities? And that's where they're building these false lists. And then they go and sell that on the dark web. So if you think of all of your personal information, just imagine for a moment, like you don't always need everything, right? If you have an email address and a date of birth, you can probably go and reset a number of things. If you have, a social security number or a tax number, you could probably redo a bunch of things there. If you've got a driver's license number, you could do a lot of things here. So they don't need to have everything to, make a good quality effort to go and compromise information.
So let's say your average business, let's say you have, you're making $250,000 a year gross, you have a few folks working for you. What kind of damage are we trying to prevent?
Yeah, cool. So that's a really good question. So we know that most businesses have got some level of cybersecurity in place. So that could be, for example, using password managers. That could be using two-factor authentication. That could be using VPNs or some type of, security services via a managed service provider or a Norton or whatever it might be. Like they're doing some forms of security. The biggest risk that they have from a small business perspective, small, medium enterprise, in my opinion, it's their brand reputation, it's their customers, and it's their cash flow. So if all of a sudden now, and this is becoming more and more prominent, that businesses are having to report any instances that happens. So there's some caveats on that, but the way that the governments around the world are going is it doesn't matter how big of a cyber incident is going to happen, they are going to want you to report it. So the reputation damage alone for most small businesses is ultimately a decision that the business owner then needs to make around, are we still operating? Because imagine for a moment, $250,000 business has their database exposed. All of a sudden, the cyber criminals are in their database. They start either doing some type of invoicing fraud to their clients. They might just go and do a phishing campaign out to their clients. and all of that, but it's come from that client. That client's at the instant, if you like, of that, there's the center of that problem. So the brand reputation from there is massive. They just lose so much credibility within their clients from that perspective. Now, the other side of things, so you got the brand reputation from that perspective. The other side of things is, well, what happens if they do penetrate the business and then ultimately put a ransom attack in place or something like lock everything else and ask them to pay 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever it might be in some type of cryptocurrency to a cyber criminal. The challenge for most, particularly that small business market, is do they have, not that no one recommends paying a ransom regardless, but do they have the cash on hand to be able to pay that out if they needed to? Most small businesses don't have 50 grand sitting lying around, to go and pay a ransom. And then the other flip side of that is if they do then go and pay that ransom, what's the guarantee that they're actually going to get all of that information back? Because typically when a cyber criminal breaks in, if you like, so to speak, if they break into the business, they've created like multiple backdoors to enable re-entry. They've copied the databases. The damage is there. And a lot of the time, and in many of these bigger incidences, a lot of the time, the cyber criminals are sitting in the back end of the systems for months, if not years, before they do anything, because they're just looking to learn, looking to understand the language that the team are using, looking to really get to know their customer, if you like, which is the craziest part about it.
So if someone's listening to this and they think that all sounds bad, and I want to do something more than just updating Norton to the current version of the antivirus, what is the intermediate step between, yes, you have antivirus, but you're not doing something huge and very expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. So on top of the current security protocols that they're putting in place, they need to incorporate some form of cyber intelligence. So at Dark Exposed, from our perspective, one of the things that we look at there is their team monitoring, so their email business domain monitoring. And what we're looking for there is, and I suppose where we're different from a number of providers, is we've aggregated intelligence from a number of intelligence providers out there. So essentially in our business model is we go and speak to the big intel guys, the big end of town, and we buy feeds, if you like, from the big end of town, and we amalgamate that data together. So we're getting multiple feeds, which means that we've got expanded coverage of the dark web. So from a small business perspective, what we could do, for example, is monitor those business domains, monitor any of their personal email addresses. So that means that we're monitoring all of their team within their business. And then what we also do is we take it to a next level and we tackle the supplier and client monitoring as well from that perspective. So with that information, we can then, based on the information that we identify on the dark web, we can come to a business and say, hey, Tommy or Mary seem to be getting targeted right now. Here are their details. They're consistently coming up, their information for sale on the dark web. Here is the information that we have identified, usernames, passwords, all of those bits and pieces that we can find on there. And here's a couple of things that you probably want to go and do about that.
So your goal is not the remediation, and it's not even it's not like hardening your fortress. It's more like giving you advice on who is it who's targeting you. That's where your energy is at.
Our focus is early detection of cyber threats. So ultimately, we want to get it to the point where we can identify a threat early enough before it happens. So in simple forms, and I'm not saying that this is factually right, okay, but this is the way that I like to explain it because I think a lot of people understand this, right? So cybersecurity, if you think of that as like your domestic police force. So cybersecurity, they're protecting what's within the borders, right? From cyber intelligence, which is the game that we play, is more on the lines of like your spy agencies, CIA, etc., right? Where we're looking at beyond the wire, we're looking at future threats outside of the ecosystem that we operate in, outside of that, looking at future potential threats that are going to come in and target. So that's what we're providing. We're providing that intelligence so that they can go and take appropriate action, whether that's to speak to their internal security consultant, whether that's just at a base level, go and have a look at the passwords and your protocols, your security handling internally. That's what we're really focused on. So it's that early detection is actually the best prevention when it comes to cybercrime.
This all sounds great, but it sounds expensive. What does it cost to go get this personal cyber CIA operating for my company?
Yeah, so and this is where I suppose we're different and we're focused on that small, medium end of town, is to go to one of our threat intelligence providers directly. Enterprise businesses are paying bare minimum 50, but typically a couple of $100,000 plus a year for threat intelligence. What we're doing is, because we're wholesaling it, if you like, we're aggregating the feeds and bringing it down to that small business market where these guys don't want to operate in. It's not lucrative for them. Where we're bringing it down there, where a business from a couple of $1,000s a year, so from $2,000 a year, can have 24/7, live coverage of the dark web, and ultimately, anything that we can identify, okay, within our realms of possibility. We can't guarantee that we cover everything because the dark web is just absolutely enormous. But for anything that we can find, that our threat intelligence units can find, specifically relating to our clients, we pass that information on.
What does it take to get started? Is it a long process, or is it more like sort of like buying antivirus software where once the thing downloads, you're protected?
Yeah, no, so there's nothing to download, there's nothing to install, anything like that. All people need to do is just go to our website, which is darkexposed.com, which is an XPOSED.com. I'm sure you'll throw that in somewhere for us, Brian. If they just go to darkexposed.com, just enter in their details, they can claim a complimentary report. So they go and do that. We'll go and run the numbers, run the data, make a phone call, have a chat with them, and if they're ready to go, we get started.
Not a comfortable conversation, folks, and I've not used John's service in this area. What I can tell you all is that John is our trusted partner for our LinkedIn growth for one of my clients. And John, if you bring half the level of professionalism to your cybersecurity that you do to your LinkedIn stuff, then this is worth looking into. Let me ask one more question here. What do you think is going to happen cybersecurity wise as more of the bad guys get more AI tools in their hands?
It's scary. Let's just put it that way. I think that the biggest thing that's really coming to town now, which a lot of people outside of the industry aren't really aware of, is the quantum computing. So with regards to all the AI and all of that, that's scary stuff. But quantum computing is like ridiculous. The big end of town right now, all of the top security guys around town are looking at how they encrypt data, specifically how they encrypt passwords, because with quantum computing and for the most part around how data is encrypted right now, it will break it in milliseconds.
That does not sound good.
No. So they're looking at a whole different structure, a lattices around how that they're actually securing all of that data. So yeah, I mean, the takeaway for me is this, right? Like, as small business owners, we invest pretty much our life, right? Our life into growing our businesses, our money, our time, our family. We give it everything, right, to create our dreams and to help people. And to have all of that just evaporate overnight because of a cybercrime, because of some, whatever, person, idiot, whatever we want to call them, not so happy person out there that just decides to destroy our business and we lose everything, it's not worth it. And by investing in your everyday cybersecurity practices and then overlaying cyber intelligence solutions like what we provide at Dark Exposed, these are things that are just going to help reduce the risk, okay, of those bits and pieces from happening, okay? It's never a foolproof system because at the end of the day, all it takes is a password for someone to be able to break in. But this is the education and the intelligence and you're throwing another layer on the onion layers of protection, right? These are the things that we want to put in place.
Well, John, thank you for sharing with us the state of the art of cyber risk. Folks, that's dark, the letter X, then POSED.com if you want to go ahead and learn more. And then John Bellamy, you can find all over social media. John, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, Brian.